Welcome back to the Andrea Giovino Show. This is Toby TNT. I got my guest today, Todd Geary. We're going to be doing part 2 of what it was like for him in the prison system with some of the highest profile criminals. Andrea Giovino couldn't be here for this particular interview. She's out doing a photo shoot right now, so this guy has some more great stories, so we decided to continue on and get some more prison stories from Todd. Todd, why don't you tell us what it was like, when you first entered into the prison system, and some of the high-profile individuals that you've encountered, specifically, let's keep it to the gangsters and organized crime individuals.
All right.
Start out.
So I started in January of '99, and tail end of the '90s, a lot of big indictments, big names going to prison from the end of the '80s that were still in '90s. So when I got there, let me back up just a hair, just explain something real quick. The prison system, I always use a baseball analogy. You have the major leagues. To me, that's the penitentiaries. All your penitentiaries are like your major league teams. Your AAA would be a medium facility. AA would be, say, a low facility, which is what I was at for the most part. And then your camps would be single A, and your Supermax would be your all-star team. So I was at the low. And so people think of a low, they think of tax fraud or something. I mean, we have murderers, we have rapists, we have all the above, but prison system is based on a point system. So if you're at a low, you could have some serious crimes, but you don't maybe have a ton of points, or by virtue of having a serious crime, you've worked your way down the system. You could have started at a penitentiary, ended up at a medium, and then finally a low or even a camp. It happens. So when I started, every housing unit had 2 or 3 big name Italians. We had Tommy Gambino, Lorenzo Menino, Frankie Steele. I'm trying to think of his last name right now. Frankie Steele was there, Kevin Granado. There was quite a few. Like I say, every housing unit had 2 or 3, and they had a lot of power. At the time, the warden that was there, she was in the system for a long time, working her way up. She had not so positive opinions. Like she saw a lot of corruption over the years, and so she tended to target some of these bigger name guys. So when I was there, one of the first posts you worked as a rookie was the visiting room. So it wasn't quite to the extent of Goodfellas, but nonetheless, the Italian guys, they could walk around. Back then, you were allowed to smoke in the visiting room. You were allowed to smoke in the prison. They'd bring sealed packs of cigarettes in. The visitors would.
These are the early days, no more.
Yeah, this is the late '90s.
Okay.
Cigars. Andrea Gotti came in to see Tommy Gambino prior to growing up Gotti. Like, she was still kind of, everybody knew her name, but she didn't have the show running yet. But she came in to see Tommy Gambino.
Did you mean Victoria Gotti?
I'm sorry, Victoria. Yeah,
okay.
Victoria Gotti. I'm sorry. So they would, when a made guy would come in, they would introduce each other's families if they didn't know somebody, or they'd walk around. It kind of reminded you a little bit of the movies. And the reason I mentioned the warden is there was a lot of corruption back then, and staff, Alanwood staff for the most part is amazing, and 98 or 99% of them are really great people, great employees, but it just takes 1 or 2. And the Italians had their hooks in just a couple staff, and that's all it took. Before you know, stuff's coming in. We had a case where they actually brought in a cryogenic sperm kit. The number I heard was $5,000. The officer was paid to bring it in because the guy was doing a lot of time. You know, obviously they wanted to have a family. Well, the only way they could do it was to bribe some guards. So there was several guards that got in trouble, and counselors. They ended up finally themselves going to prison.
Oh, wow.
And then when this happened, the warden did a couple things. A couple, the Italians, she kept in special housing for a very long time to keep them away from the general population. Finally, several were shipped out of the prison to another prison. They did everything they could to just kind of break up all these problems. And what finally brought it down was there was a rat that, from what stories I was told, he wasn't Italian, but he kind of hung with them. He's the one that started snitching on everybody and started the investigation, and that's what brought them all down. And that was kind of the tail end of the power base and the control they had at Alanwood. I mean, there's always Italians there, and they're somebodies and they have power, but they got taken down because of all this stuff going on with the illegal crimes and stuff.
It sounds like the warden got wind of it. She had enough, and then there was a target.
She put the kibosh on it and really broke up a lot of what was going on. And like back then, like the thing you want in a housing unit is like an orderly's job, something it's kind of a fluff off job. You do 10 minutes of work and you got the rest of the day to yourself. A lot of these counselors would give the Italian guys easier jobs. I mean, just 'cause that's what they wanted it. And she, once this happened, she made these guys work. Like we have what's called Unicor, which is a prison factory, and she put several in Unicor and literally made them work jobs that they did not want to work or be a part of. But she just kind of set the ship straight again, I guess you'd say, and really fixed a lot of the problems or tried to. So, because a lot of inmates are very when they know that you're not going to do anything for them or you're not going to be manipulated, they leave you alone. You go about your day-to-day business. But if they think there's a weak one, they'll try and pick them off or try and get them to do whatever they want. And it'll start with something simple, like, hey, CO, you want a cup of coffee or whatever it might be. And then from there, once they get a hook in you, they own you. There's no turning back then.
How's it about the violence in lower security prison? A lot of these guys, some of them don't have a ton of time, or they're not violent individuals. That's why they got moved to lower security.
Right.
I got to still make the assumption, you put a lot of men in a cage together that have criminal backgrounds, aggressive behavior, you're still going to get a certain amount of violence and altercations that are going to occur.
If you have 1,000 guys living together, I don't care if they're monks, eventually there's going to be a fight and a problem or an issue. That one thing, like I said about the baseball analogy with the big guys in the penitentiary, they're usually your most violent and straight on down. But things happen in lows. We had a situation that was over soccer, believe it or not, and 23 Mexicans just beat the living crap out of 3 Jamaicans.
23 Mexicans beat the living crap out of 3 Jamaicans
over soccer.
Wow.
Over a soccer game is what it was. The one guy, he was beat so bad that when they actually walked him up to me, I didn't recognize him. And mind you, I see these guys every day. He was beat to a pulp that bad that I didn't recognize him. He got 4 teeth knocked out. He lost his eye.
Wow.
He actually had one eye knocked out. And so even though that day taught me that even though this is a low, it can happen. And I think Oakdale is one of the worst riots in the Federal Bureau of Prisons over the years, and that was a low. So it just takes that right formula or that right bad day, and you can have the violence. Since you asked about the violence, I worked at the Medium for 6 months, and we had a situation there where a guy didn't pay his bet. He thought he was going to welch out on his betting that he owed money on.
You got to pay the piper once you place that bet, man.
Once you say you're going to bet something, you pay up. Well, this guy thought he was going to get out of it. So it's a Friday, he's leaving Monday. He's standing in the chow line, and he thinks one of his friends are messing with him. Here, they walked up behind him and gave him, I think they call it $1.50. You need 150 stitches to fix it. They took a razor blade, cut him right here, and cut him all the way to the back of his neck, and basically filleted him. And I think it was over 200 stitches till it was all said and done. And I actually escorted him to health services, and he actually said while we're walking, "Oh, why couldn't they just stab me?" And the average person was like, "Why would they just want to stab him?" Well, when they cut your face like that, you have that the rest of your life. Anywhere you go, they're going to see that you have this mark from here to the middle of your neck, whereas if you get stabbed, you can cover that up. But he actually made a comment, like, I had to think about it for a minute, and I'm like, oh, that's why. But from that, I mean, you get the penitentiaries. I mean, there have been murders and so on and so forth. It can be extremely violent, and a lot of times for over nothing.
Now, you're a big guy, all right? I mean, 6'4", 270. You know, a small guy runs into you, he's running into a wall, but you're still going to have your hands full. Yeah, dealing with trying to break up 23 Mexicans. And
right. These guys...
Even with a handful of correctional officers.
These guys work out and train all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, these gang manifestos, I don't care which gang you're talking, they basically have a set of rules, and one of those things is you need to stay in shape and work out and be ready at a moment's notice. I mean, every gang out there has rules, and this is how you will handle yourself. These are the punishments if you don't follow these rules. I have it all laid out, and so I don't care how big you are. You get 5 guys against you, you're not going to do well. You know, it's just, you know, everybody thinks.
Or if you get stabbed, shanked. You know,
exactly.
You get hit from behind. You know, it's
exactly. And I mean, we've had professional boxers there. We had a guy. Maybe look him up if you get a chance. His name is Duke Tanner. He was on his way. I forget what weight he fought at. He was on his way to the championship belt. He got a big drug case, got busted. He was a professional boxer.
Now, do you see guys will tend to not get into altercations with guys like that? They know he's a pro boxer. He's going to be good with his hands. He's going to be better than 99 out of 100 guys in there. Out of every 100, he's probably either going to be the best guy or he's going to be able to beat 99 of the other guys. Will they still mess with a guy like that?
Occasionally.
He'll still occasionally get messed with, even though he's a high-level pro.
For the most part, no.
Yeah.
But you might have that one guy that's, man, I wonder how I do against this guy.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term, a dumb one. You know, because, I mean, a professional boxer. And we had a professional boxer. We've had some MMA guys over the year, but yeah, Duke Tanner comes to mind, and like I say, he was, I think, if memory serves me correct, he was undefeated.
Okay.
And he became part of a big drug case, and he was in 18 or 20 years, and he actually was given a pardon by President Trump when Trump was in office.
Wow. Okay.
So he actually was let out and try and do it, try and make a comeback, but I think he ended up maybe training. I haven't looked him up since then.
Did you see many altercations with the Italians when you were in prison? I mean, usually Italians carry themselves well, but you know, there's a lot of jealousy and stuff that goes back and forth with Italians.
There's 2 aspects in a sense. A, if you can have somebody else take care of your problem, just pay and have it taken care of, because then you're not going to special housing or transferred or whatever. Like the Italian guys, a lot of them hated the lows because they don't have doors on the cells, so you can't shut the doors. So they don't like the noise. There's community bathrooms. There's not like your cell. You have your own bathroom, whereas at a low, it's a communal bathroom and showers, and you have to share all this stuff. The main one I can think of is when they got the priest's paperwork and found out that he was in what he was in for, and they just beat him senseless. You know, like I say, he actually crawled up the range to the officer the night he got beat, because they found out who he was and what he was in for, and that's not a good thing to be in for.
So who actually beat the priest?
I don't think they actually figured it out, because back then they didn't even have cameras in the housing units. I think it was the Italian guys.
The Italian guys beat up the priest because they didn't know he was a priest, but he was in there for sexual assault of young children, and so that's totally unacceptable. So they decided to put their hands on him.
Take care of him, because at the time they were able to get a hold of paperwork that they shouldn't have, and they were paying for it, and then they were able to get anybody's PSI, which is a pre-sentence investigation. And when you have a PSI, it'll tell you all the background stuff of everything they found before you came to prison. And then with this guy, they found, oh, look, he's a pedophile. So like I say, they took care of him in no short terms.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Anything else on these Italians before we close out? Anything else you want to give us on what it was like being in jail with these big personality guys? Because again, you know, you got guys that have real big personalities. Some of the guys that you mentioned earlier, Tommy Gambino, the son of one of the biggest mob bosses ever, Carlo Gambino, and you know, some of these other individuals. I know, you know, like we discussed in the earlier podcast, you also have Persico in there, another big name Mafia guy.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit, just maybe in a general term even. One of the hardest things for an Italian guy to hear from an officer, what do you think the hardest thing for an Italian guy to hear from an officer is?
Just taking any type of order. Like
No,
that's it.
Plain and
Nobody,
simple,
we don't
no.
want to hear no, you know?
You have guys that might have run multi-million-dollar organizations on the street in charge of how many people, and they come in there, and their first day there, I'm their boss.
Yeah.
You know, they have it's a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, I would try and be understanding of the sense of, hey, look, man, this is what we need to do. I know you don't like it or whatever, but, you know, when push comes to shove, you have to say, no, this is how it is, and so on and so forth. But,
And you know, that's a great example. Like, you know, you're their boss. You get a guy that's maybe a captain or a boss, some type of boss on the street. He's got a whole crew of guys under him that maybe have guys under them.
Exactly.
And now they're coming in here and, like you said, you're the boss. You're basically telling them what to do.
And you say, you know what, this is your job detail, this is where you're working. They might hate it. Or, I mean, you could have an officer that's 22 years old, just got hired, and now this guy who, like you said, Tommy Gambino, he was in his 60s. This guy is in charge of him. You know, if he says, hey, you're not going here, you're not going here. You know, and I think therein lies why they try and have a little corruption or a little, you know, get their hooks and stuff to a degree. But once they know that that's not the case, that you're not going to do any favors or anything, then they just treat you like a regular guy. I mean, for the most part, I was always respectful dealing with them. They, once they saw how I operated and how I was an officer, they seemed, in all appearances, to have nothing but respect for me.
I'm going to close out by telling these young guys that are thinking about committing crimes, you know, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
They think, and you're shaking your head, no, like, don't do it. You know, these young guys that are thinking about walking down that criminal path, you know, seen it too many times, time and time again, over and over again. You know, what would you say to them to discourage them before we close out? I would like your perspective
I can
to
do
discourage
that for you.
these young men, these young kids, men, whatever the case may be, that are walking the path of illegitimacy and crime. How do what would you say to them?
9 out of 10 or more, or you're going to end up caught or dead. And then let's say, for sake of argument, you get caught. You get 20 years. Take 20 years and divide that out into the amount of money you made and see how much you're really making.
Nothing.
Yeah,
You're
minimum
broke.
wage if you're lucky. I
Minimum
did
wage.
it. Guys made $1 million. Divide that by 20 years. Is it really worth it? And it never is, you know. Yeah. And one other thing I'll say about guys always would complain about conspiracy. One of the big charges a lot of guys went, like, especially to a low for, was conspiracy. And they'd complain and this and that. And I'd always ask them one simple question. Well, did you do it? Well, yeah. You know, but, you know, you never beat a conspiracy charge. And take the public defender, because these guys would spend millions, and the lawyers will put it to them as much as the judge does. I mean, they think that they're hiring this high-end lawyer, and don't plead the case out, call it a day, and take what time you got coming, because I don't know how many inmates I talked to over 20-some years that said, yeah, if I'd have just taken a plea bargain, I'd have got 9 years, but instead I fought the case and got 20. Because when you fight the feds and cost them money, they're not going to be as nice as
the feds have a lot of technology. They got a lot of resources. You know, they're much more intelligent than the average criminal. On top of that, they got the resources behind them. Yeah. You know, we're going to close out with that, buddy. I appreciate you coming back down again for another interesting interview. To all the viewers, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and God bless.